This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by iZotope, Atom Audio, Native Instruments, Lewitt, Spectra 1964, and OWC. You're hearing my voice right now on the Lewitt Pure Tube microphone through the Spectra 1964 STX 100D mic pre and C610 complementer mixed with iZotope RX, Ozone, Neutron, and Nectar, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD and mixed on Atom Audio monitors. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the link in the show notes. It's a great way for you to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
I cut my teeth doing a lot of records that most people wouldn't even understand how they're supposed to sound.
There's a small group of us that I would like to think of as some sort of musical historian.
So I'm going to buy every single David Bowie record and I'm going to listen to each one of them 10 billion million times until I've unearthed all the secrets. The Beatles, the Smiths, the Clash, the Who.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. My studio is proudly powered by OWC, and I love how it's improved my workflow. OWC can connect all your audio work drives, trackballs, mix controllers, MIDI keyboards, audio interfaces, displays, or cameras so that you can work fast and focus on making your best record ever. Go look at the Mini Stack STX, Thunder Bay 4, or Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock at maxsales.com/rockstars to find the perfect solution for your studio from OWC. And thanks for using our custom link in the show notes. Howdy, rock stars. I've got a secret to tell you about how I get a consistent sound mixing over 1,000 hours of recording studio rock stars. My secret is using iZotope, RX, Ozone, Neutron, and Nectar to make this podcast sound great. Right now, you're hearing RX breath control, declick, declip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, Ozone multiband compression, Neutron EQ, and limiting, all from iZotope. Go to iZotope.com and use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off. Howdy, rock stars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, the podcast bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guests today is a pretty special episode. I've got 3 guests here. I've got Pete Lyman over on my left, John Baldwin on my right, and Brandi Towles, mixing, mastering, and cutting vinyl at Infrasonic Sound East here in Nashville, Tennessee. So I'll do a quick introduction to each of these guys. Pete Lyman, who's been a guest on the episode 164 before on Recording Studio Rockstars, is a Grammy-nominated mastering engineer and owner of Infrasonic Mastering, an audio and vinyl mastering studio with locations in Los Angeles, California, and Nashville, Tennessee. Pete's digital and vinyl mastering career spans thousands of titles with clients like Chris Stapleton, Jason Isbell, Brandi Carlile, Sturgill Simpson, John Prine, Weezer, Panic at the Disco, and many more. John Baldwin is a Grammy-nominated mastering engineer as well, based here in Nashville, Tennessee. In 2010, John launched John Baldwin Mastering out of a studio he built in his house, eventually moving to Historic RCA Studio A. John then joined the Infrasonic Mastering roster in 2021, bringing a wide spectrum of genres and skills, including restoring and mastering from vinyl and tape. His discography includes artists such as Nancy Sinatra, Deer Tick, Emmylou Harris, The Jesus Lizard, Sly Stone, The Stone Roses, Margo Price, Delta Spirit, and many others, including Twiggs II, a record I produced years ago at the Toy Box Studio, which was one of the first times we got to work together, and it sounds awesome. And it's in the show notes, Rockstars, so check it out. Brandi Towles is a mixing engineer and assistant engineer / all-around good guy to multi-Grammy winner F. Reid Shippen, who's probably in the other room right now, mixing as we speak. Originally from Georgetown, Kentucky, after traveling the country for many years, Brandon landed in Nashville to work with Reed and Infrasonic Immersive. He has co-mixed and assisted on projects for artists including Dierks Bentley, Parker McCollum, The Aces, Kenny Chesney, and many others. Outside of music, I had to include this. Outside of music, Brandon loves playing basketball, the Detroit Lions, also his Wu-Tang shirt that he's wearing right now, and very, very short walks on the beach. Big shout out and thank you to Raylan Janicki for putting this together. Ray, you rock. Please welcome Pete Lyman, John Baldwin, Brandon Towles to Recording Studio Rockstars. Pete, John, Brandon, are you ready to rock?
Oh, yeah.
Totally. Born ready.
Sweet. So I gave brief introductions, rather maybe than going through and giving long ones, although maybe we should give a chance, since we've done an episode together before, to let you guys sort of tell us a little bit more about where you're from as well. Let's start with Brandon.
Sure.
Brandon, tell us a little, give us the brief overview to how you landed in that chair right now today.
Yeah, let's hear about that chain.
Yeah. So there were really two things that I enjoyed doing my entire life, and those were traveling and doing music. So I was fortunate enough to spend a couple years as a adventure travel guide, toured all around the country, got to see a lot of stuff, realized that I like traveling, but I love music. So I hitched a bus to New York City, thought I was going to make it in music. COVID-19 happened about 3 months in, moved me back home to Kentucky. Thought Nashville was a lot closer than New York was, so maybe I'll give that a try, and landed with Reed. Interned here for like 9 months. Worked bartending on the weekends to make a living, and the opportunity came to take over for Reed's old assistant, and there's no downside, so I took it.
So do you feel like the stuff you learned about audio and recording happened right here, starting with the internship, or you already had you'd had some experience with that?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I was one of those weirdos that COVID was really helpful for me. I hunkered down and I trained like a Rocky movie, man. Like it was like, all right, 2 hours a day, YouTube tutorials, whatever I can get my hands on.
Like your last name, towel pull-ups from the rafters.
Yes, absolutely.
In the shed.
Mental push-ups.
Upside down sit-ups.
Yeah, everything I could think of, just to really go for it, man. Because like when I set my mind to something, I really, give it 100%. So I got to a point where I felt ready to be an intern, and just started spamming emails out, and I was like, all right, whoever hits me back, I'm going. So it was Nashville, New York, wherever. And I got a text message from Michael, Reed's old engineer, and he was like, dude, are you not getting our emails? Because we've emailed you back like 5 times. And I was like, oh man, I must have some sort of filter or something on my email, but like I could be there in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, I think as like a adventure travel guide, your email's always on snooze, right?
It was a school email, actually. I went to the University of Kentucky, and they were like, okay, you have not been here long enough. We are just deleting every single thing that you've ever had on your email account. So I learned that the hard way. But
well,
yeah,
it's cool that you're here, man. This is we'll talk more about it for sure. And Reed Rockstars, he's been we were classmates in school. He's been a guest on the podcast multiple times. And I believe we have an episode a little prior to this one, so you can check that out. I'll put that in the show notes too. My friend John, give us a little bit of an intro to your journey to get here. Of course, you and I think we knew it. Maybe the time we met was when you mastered the Twiggs album.
I think we knew each other a little before that.
A little before that, yeah.
Yeah, I've been mastering as long as I can remember. In the 20th century, I moved to Murfreesboro for college, and I was studying engineering, and I was taking just any weird little dumb job I could. I worked for studios, I worked for rack jobbers, I worked for publishing companies, just intern level kind of stuff. And it took like a year to land this internship at Georgetown Masters under Denny Purcell and later under Andrew Mendelson. I I found out early on that it was really important for me to work on records that humans were going to actually hear. So that became really important to me as I realized that. And so I ended up staying at Georgetown for about 10 years. I had a studio with some buddies for a while, and I've been on my own for a long time, and very excited lately to be working with Pete and the whole crew here at Infrasonic.
Right on, from Georgetown, Kentucky to Georgetown Mastering.
Totally.
Have you got a Georgetown for us too, Pete?
I don't, unfortunately.
Well, so sorry, John. I just jump right away from you. So you've been here for a little bit. I do remember when I first met you, you were maybe camped out in Music Row, sort of like right next to Ocean Way.
Yeah, that was a really neat studio. It was called Lake Fever Productions, and I was working with two buddies from college, and we built just the raddest studio in the world.
Were those the guys that were doing the cool video series for a while?
Yeah, I was so grouchy about that. I thought it was a total waste of time, and it was.
They were so good, though.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
They were really good.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. And so your studio here, when you're here working, where are you? Are you in the other room that's right there?
No, I'm usually working here with Pete.
Okay, cool.
I'm usually here to cut vinyl, which I've been doing for about 2 years now, and man, it is going to take a lifetime to really learn. But yeah, it's fascinating. It's tactile. It's financially disastrous. It's yeah, there's a lot to it. But
you get
it's
to
really
look through
exciting.
a magnifying glass.
Yeah.
There's not many.
Oh, there's the vacuum. There's there's an infinite number of things to break. It is, yeah.
All right, cool. We'll talk more about that too. So now let me pivot over to you, Pete. Last but not least.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about you gave us a little bit of an overview, which we can hear on the previous episode, but between that, that was a while ago that we did that interview. That was years ago.
Yeah. So, I've been a mastering engineer for about 24 years and was a musician my entire adult life. And, like I've kind of explained before, being a musician and growing up I grew up in Colorado, kind of bounced around between Boulder and Denver area. And back then there weren't a lot of options for recording when you were an artist. So, there were really two studios that we had the option to work in. So after a while, I just became more interested in learning how to do it myself and started off with early 4-tracks. But, my background was IT. So I got really interested in early digital recording, and I was building my own computers and stuff. And then I ended up transferring with a large IT company that I was working for, and I ended up in California. I migrated a big computer data center to Sacramento, and I thought, oh my God, it's great. I'm in California now, but I didn't realize Sacramento was not quite where I wanted to be. So ended up
the hard way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No offense to any friends that live in Sacramento, but it just in the 90s wasn't really where I wanted to be. So ended up moving to the Bay Area, bounced around there a little bit, and then ended up in Los Angeles, and that's really where I started to focus on mastering.
Where is Sacramento? Is that between LA and Bay Area?
No, it is sort of it is east of the Bay Area.
Inland,
yes.
Okay,
Inland.
Between the moon and New York City.
Yeah. It's where,
Well done.
exactly.
Well played, sir.
It's where it's really hot.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So if you want to live somewhere that's 117 degrees, move to Sacramento during the summer.
And then very quickly again, let's just go around the room. Each of you talk about or just what instruments do you all play? Did you start out banging on an instrument first?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I play a little bit of everything. I've been playing in bands since I was 15 years old. I played drums, bass, guitar. I always say bass is sort of the instrument that I'm most proficient at, but these days, mostly for my own stuff, I'm sort of in love with guitar. So nice. I'm really kind of woodshedding, so to speak. And
what if you were going to go pick up a guitar right now? Which one would you pick up?
Oh, I just got a new custom shop Jazz Master. That's what I'd pick up.
Jazz Master, sweet. Yep. All right. So it's got that bright, skronky top.
I love it. Yeah.
Awesome.
I've got a bunch of instruments though. So I've got a 335 that I like to play a lot. I've got a Telly that I love. And yeah.
Do you feel like, we don't have to go too far on this, but do you feel like you discovered the interest in all those instruments because of all the people you were recording who are playing them at different times?
Yeah, when in my early days of being in a band, I come from kind of a punk rock hardcore background, so I sort of played the instrument that I could afford.
Right. It needed to be an off-brand version of something.
Yeah, and I played in the mid 90s. I played in a bunch of garage rock bands in Denver, so the vibe was like we were really into weird Japanese guitars like K's and Taisco Del Rey's and Hagstroms, and they all look cool, but they all sounded like garbage. But that was kind of part of the sound. So, I played a lot of really weird, oddball Japanese guitars and stuff. And then in my other bands, I mean, I for years played a Les Paul Studio and but not necessarily because I was. I'm sure back then in the 90s, I bought a Les Paul because I saw someone playing a Les Paul. And that's the same reason I bought a Marshall, but there wasn't as much thought into it, into thinking about the overall tone as kind of I do now because I've experienced being in the studio and seeing what my favorite players are using.
Right. So now choosing a guitar tone is kind of a pain in the ass, whereas back then you just picked up the guitar you hadn't played.
Exactly. Yeah. Now it's agonizing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
John, how about you, man?
Yeah, I grew up playing all kinds of stuff. I guess my primary instrument is guitar. I started out on the drums. Also played a lot of piano. I barely pick up the guitar at all anymore. I play in my head like 24/7. Really just trying to like understand a song that I'm working on or listening to a song on the radio or something. But yeah, I really, when I pick it up, I really enjoy it. And
how often when you're working on a project, so you'd be mastering the project. If you're working on it right now, you're mastering it. You're at the sort of like final stage of it. How often do you have to talk guitar speak and chord, naming chords and progressions and things like that ever?
Almost never to a client, but constantly with myself, just so I know where the next note is going to be. If this song is a little bit flat or sharp, I kind of need to know because that's going to affect where I'm going to put frequencies.
Nice.
And just knowing music theory and ear training, just I know what
fundamental
the 4 chord, what the
stuff.
5 chord's going to be, what the minor 3 chord's going to be. So it's just helpful.
Nobody ever really plays that 7 diminished much, do they?
Some do.
Some do? All right.
Yeah.
How about you, Brandon?
Yeah, man, I played a ton of Rock Band and Guitar Hero.
Nice.
I
saw you guys had some video game credits in your discography too.
Oh yeah, Reed and I got to work on God of War, the new God of War with Hozier. It was really cool. But and that was in Quad, which was a new venture for us, or me anyway.
New venture, old format.
Yeah.
But no, I've always played on a hobby level. I owned guitar. I played drums with a buddy of mine in college, but he made beats back when Fruity Loops was still a thing before FL Studios. But hip hop grabbed me first, so it started with that, and then I got into more rock music in college. The classic like opened your mind to a lot of different stuff. So always on a hobby level, especially in Tennessee, Nashville. I would never tell someone that I play music professionally.
Yeah.
But I always was a fan of going to concerts and listening to music. I was always had my headphones in, don't really.
Where's the wackiest place since you're doing all that adventure stuff? Where's the wackiest place you went to a concert?
Ooh.
Which one do you talk about to your friends to impress them?
It was more so I had a good streak going where I would hit a lot of festivals over the summers. And I did back-to-back weekends. I did a week out in Bonnaroo. Shout
what
out
year?
Manchester. I went 5 in a row. This was 2011 to 2015, 2016.
I was there.
Yeah.
We were
they all
both
blend
there.
together, man. They all blend together after a while. But I did that and then got in the car and drove straight up to Delaware for first year Firefly Festival.
Yeah, man, home of the credit card. Great call.
Do not recommend.
Atom Audio can provide all your monitor needs, whether you're setting up a first-time home studio for recording music or podcasts, or a world-class full-size studio for professional mixing and mastering in stereo or immersive sound. Featuring the XART tweeter and custom DSP onboard processing, the A-series monitors will perfectly adapt to your studio. Get the Atom Audio monitors and subwoofers that are right for you with an extended 5-year warranty at atomaudio.com. Hey rock stars, have you checked out Native Instruments recently? Look, no matter what style of music you make, Native Instruments gives your studio everything you need, from drums, loops, and beats to the coolest synths, realistic strings, guitar amps, and futuristic synth pads. I personally love recording and tracking real bands in my studio, but then also adding awesome overdubs from Battery, Contact, Massive X, Super 8, Guitar Rig, and Hybrid Keys, for example. Go pick up Complete Start for free today with a bundle of 2,000 sounds and 6 gigs of samples over at nativeinstruments.com and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off. Some restrictions apply. No, there's some great music comes out of Delaware. There's a band, the Spinto band that I produced with Robin Eaton back in the day. Those guys were from Wilmington.
Oh, really?
Area.
Yeah.
Just outside the Brandywine River, I think. Is that right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Home of no state income tax. Hold on, there's a no sales tax.
Right, I thought that was Nashville.
Well, yeah, no income tax or no sales tax in Delaware. Is that right?
I don't know. They're
I
like,
mean, there's
listen,
really-
we got him on the credit card fee. Let's give him a break.
Yeah, okay.
We didn't need to double tax.
Zing.
Okay, so let's do the. Well, let's try this one because I rarely do this, and I'll just hit you as a group. I like to ask guests for an inspirational quote. Anything pop to mind for any of you guys? Anything that just kind of inspires you to hit the studio?
I have
Go, Brandon, go.
a thing that a creed that I live by that I can't honestly remember if I made it up, if I stole it from somebody, but it goes back to the concert thing. But I always say life's short, buy the tickets, because there's been a couple times in my life where I'm like, I'll catch them next time, or, I'll do it next time. And then the band breaks up or somebody dies or you can't afford it or whatever. You can always make more money, but if you have a passion, if there's something that you really enjoy, like, you'll always regret not doing it if you have the chance.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah.
Life short, buy the tickets. How about you?
I always try to remind everyone here, and it's mostly something I say to myself. It's like, my worst day as a mastering engineer is better than most people's best days at whatever job they work at.
Yeah.
Nice.
We have
That's a good one.
this is a dream job. I mean, we get to listen to new music before almost anyone else gets to hear it. And we're the ones in charge of like the final detail, the final polish. And I really try to never lose sight of how important our job is and that people are trusting us with their children, so to speak. So it's...
Except that your job is to make their children as loud as possible.
Well, of course. To smash it. No, I just, I think that it's really important to never lose sight of what we're doing. And, bottom line, this is a customer service job, and it's important to, sometimes part of our job is to reassure people that are a little unsure and provide some objectivity after, someone's been in the muck working on a record, sometimes for years. And you tend to, when you're an artist, you can easily lose sight of the overall picture. And it's really fun and inspiring for me when we're able to reassure people and tell them, hey, no, don't worry. This is amazing. Like, let us help you with this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty fun. How about you? Anything come to mind for you?
One of my mentors would always say, if you're the smartest person in the room, you are in the wrong room.
Mhm.
So when I'm working by myself, I default to getting weird and antisocial and obsessive, and it's important. It's just important for the work also, but it's good to be around other people. It's good to collaborate. It's good to cooperate.
Yeah. I'm in a hell of a room right now. It's pretty good. I put myself in a good room.
Well, we do a lot of that here, and I think that's one of the strengths that we have. We're constantly, all the time I walk across the hallway and bounce some ideas off Dan, or Brandon and I are sitting there talking, drinking coffee, and John comes over, and we're, get into long, crazy conversations about some really obscure area of pro audio. And it's really fun to be able to get ideas. And, especially with John here, he's one of my favorite mastering engineers. So,
me too.
I get to have him, we get to be on the same team, and I get to ask him questions, and we get to bounce ideas off of each other. And it's amazing to have these resources.
Yeah, that's cool. Let's keep talking about that. And also, I didn't preface this by saying you guys don't have to wait for me to ask you a question to say, just jump right in. You guys can talk amongst yourselves too. So just, to all three of you, talk a little bit more about this like shared space, maybe describe it visually, visualize it for the rock stars so they can kind of picture what's going on here and what the spaces are and, what's a day like here in the studio.
So we're currently in sort of my main room, which is also we all use as the shared 914 Atmos room, and we cut a lot of vinyl out of this room as well. Although we have kind of a unique setup at the studio, which I can get into about the vinyl lathe. But before I do that, so we're in a PMC room, a 914 Atmos setup. The Foundation, the LCR are PMC BB5 XBDs. So if you haven't seen them, look them up. They're massive, ridiculous, huge speakers and sound just absolutely amazing.
Can I point out something too? So Pete, when I walked in here, one of the conversations we had was I looked over and I realized that the way you have your speaker set up, Atmos requires a center speaker. So anybody who's thinking about that for their studio, they're like, well, where do I put that? Usually I have a screen there. That's where I'm working. And it was cool because yours allows for the screen to be a little bit below the center speaker. And that just got me all excited because I was like, oh, is this possible now where I don't have to like hurt my neck to like raise a screen way high or anything?
It's ideal. I had to rebuild this front wall 3 or 4 times. And it's funny, I had just rebuilt it before we decided to do Atmos. And so I have a large screen. I don't know how big it is, 60 some inches maybe. And it's recessed into my front wall. So it actually sits behind the speakers to cut down on direct reflections. But I had it a little bit higher. So when we installed the Atmos configuration, we had to lower it, so I had to change some things about my desk to make sure I could see it. But
right, because your meters are down super low. You gotta almost peek over a little bit.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of engineering involved, but I absolutely love it.
It's a good tip, I think, and I'd be curious if you guys have experienced this yet. I'm gonna guess you haven't experienced this as much yet. So I'll preface this by saying that when I was younger, I was willing to put up with all kinds of bullshit to work a day in the studio.
Yeah.
Like keyboards on my lap, I'm in a funky chair in somebody's basement, I'm looking up to my upper left and everything. And then your neck and your back start really hurting and you're like, I don't know if I can do this. Then you spend too much on a fancy chair like the one I'm sitting in right now. But more recently, I've got a studio where the screen's down low and I can look over the desk and it's like, it feels ergonomically correct. And other than my ass not wanting to be in a chair, it's like, it makes a big difference. What about you? Do you feel like, talk about working in this new space and like, what's it like to step into a new studio environment and start getting
it's awesome. I still do most of my work at my own place. And then when I'm coming here, it's to argue with Pete about something or to cut vinyl lacquers or work on Atmos. And it's always a fun time to be here. I've been coming over to this building for many years. I helped Reed to a tiny extent when he first started getting this building together, and it's been awesome to see how it grows. It's awesome to hear Pete's amazing monitoring situation. It's mind-blowing to cut the vinyl. Yeah, it's just an amazing place.
So Rockstars, again, to visualize it, we're sitting in the control room right now as we do this, and we've got the mic set up in 1, 2, 3, 4 in a circle, like a crisscross, and then John and Pete are both sitting at mics, and then inches from their head is an Atmos speaker that's sitting there. It's like, don't elbow it in the middle. Get excited. I'll try not to ask any exciting questions. All right.
Surrounded by speakers.
But I mean, that is something that's really, I guess it's new and different to Atmos. I mean, I guess surround maybe had to deal with that too before, but it seems like Atmos, getting into this world of Atmos requires a lot of figuring, like where are you going to put the speakers?
Yep.
Yeah. We made a lot of changes to Reed's room. We also have a 914 setup in there with PMCs, and one of my first assignments as Reed's assistant was, okay, you got the gig. Now we're going to build an Atmos room. And I was like, okay, cool, let's do it. Figure it out. And one thing we did was take out the SSL console that was still lingering in the room.
That he used for years.
Yep.
Yeah. And at the end of days, it was mostly for routing, running it through it and doing some quad bus stuff. But one of the great things about that was I got to reroute the entire room, rewire the entire room. Found out where everything was going.
That's one of the benefits of starting out in the studio and doing the rewire thing. That's what I did. I really learned. I knew every wire in there.
Yeah.
It's a good superpower to have.
Job security too. Yeah. I don't think anybody else does know how that room's wired. We stole the TV idea from Lemon Tree. We've actually got ours sitting on a couple guitar stands.
What's the TV idea?
Dropping it below the center speaker.
Okay. All right.
So we have a PMC 8.2 as our center channel. So we have to put it on a stand instead of syncing into a wall, which is
these are
awesome.
Different speakers in the mastering room here than what you guys have over there.
Correct. Yeah, we're running 8.2 XBDs. So it's when two 8.2s are stacked on top of each other on both sides for stereo, and then another 8.2 in the middle for the center channel. So we've just got a big ass TV hanging out on the ground onto guitar stands, and it works perfectly. The angle's great. Your neck does not hurt.
Yeah.
Like you were saying.
Yeah.
Although I would say I'm not a big fan of our chairs.
Let's not get into that.
Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound kind of weak or distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding much closer to professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools, and the best part is that these mixing techniques work for you in any DAW, whether you're on Logic, Cubase, Studio One, Reaper, anything you can think of. If you're ready now to make your best record ever, then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Chairs are a bit of an exploration, Don't you think? I mean, we've probably all sat in a whole bunch of different chairs in studios, and it's like, this is an Aeron.
The Aeron's hard to beat.
Although, I had, one of my arms broke off on mine. I haven't.
Oh, they break.
Them.
Yeah.
But I have the Carl Tatz chairs now, which are pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But then it's like, it seems like with every chair, there's something you love about it. And then there's just this one thing you're like, man, I wish, whatever.
We're thinking about going standing desk, actually.
I'm a big fan of the standing desk. I did that for a few years before we switched my studio. And
a little time up.
My mastering mentor did that.
So a mastering studio where it's set up standing?
Yeah. He was mostly cutting vinyl in Los Angeles. So, it worked really well for that setup. It has speakers up higher, and he never sat Richard Simpson. He never sat down all day. Stood. That's how I learned.
Richard Simmons? Well, he was Richard
Simpson.
famous for that.
Yeah. Not Richard. Right? Yeah, there was no aerobic activity involved, and no shorts. Yeah.
Nice. John, what about you? Any sort of favorite comfort zone for the studio tips?
Man, I mean, I'm always interested in some kind of ergonomic improvement, but there is no technology that I cannot use to injure myself somehow. I sit in an Aeron. I'm mostly seated. I worked for years with the computer off to the side. I can't really do it.
Yeah, so because then the sound's coming in one ear while you're working.
Yeah. Or your neck is weird.
Yeah.
But I mean, I try to avoid being on the screen, so it is a balance that must be struck.
Yeah.
I've seen many mastering engineers work standing the entire time, and I can see some advantages to it.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about standing, because then I'd have it set up, and I was like, well, I don't want to stand all the time. So then I bought a really tall chair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I scooted up. But at least, and now I'm like, well, so what if I want to stand again?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, maybe I'll just keep the room the same and I'll cut a giant hole in the floor right where my spot is.
Then do it.
Like a little sunken living room like the 70s. Then I'll put shag carpet back in the studio, right?
Yeah, I like it. You know, when I'm working, I mean, as you can see in here, my smaller screen is off to the left, and I've always worked like that. And the main screen in front really is mostly meters. And that's just sort of a habit I got into. I don't know. It's just the way I like it set up. But I purposely for me, I like having the main screen off to my left because it forces me to make changes and get out of the zone and then go back and focus straight ahead without staring at the waveform and thinking about that too much. And also, if I do have clients in the room, I think it's a real bad idea to watch the audio go by.
Yeah.
So I usually try to set it up so that the clients can't. Meters, that's fine. But I think watching the audio is a bad idea.
It's just like a default. Like people can't control themselves. So it's just, you need something for your eyes to follow. But unfortunately, it does the wrong thing.
Yep. They see things that they think make a sound when they don't. And, having it off to the left for me it's worked well for me.
So out at NAMM, when I saw you guys out there, we were all at the PMC Atmos booth, and I was listening to Andrew Sheps play his mixes, which was a great experience. It was really fun to do, and they sounded amazing. And then but there was no screen there. It was just this Atmos experience. And I was listening, and I paused for a second mentally inside. I was like, what if I had a screen right now? If we were looking at a video or something while we were listening to this, and I could kind of tell that, like, just from experience and memory, I was like, I think that would have like lowered the experience for me. I think I would have rather just like gone totally auditory and just like imagine everything that I hear.
I'll take it one step past that. I think the coolest, maybe best sounding Atmos rooms are the ones where you can't see the speakers either.
Agreed.
I think that's a great idea, and it's something that we dealt a little bit with when we were building Reed's room. We were doing some Atmos over at UMG, and they have a room where all of their speakers are behind fabric, and it was a really cool experience because it completely takes away the visual element.
Even the front wall speakers.
Maybe I can't remember. I think the surrounds were.
I had a chance to see Ryan Hewitt's room here in Berry Hill, and I think all the surrounding speakers were hidden.
Yeah, maybe
but the front wall was still sort of visible.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not suggesting that's the way you have to do it, but
it's a good way to do it with PMCs.
Movie theaters have always traditionally just had the speakers hidden. They're all behind screens, which are perforated.
Right.
Yeah, we're sort of. We can't talk a ton about this now, but we're planning on building a new facility, and when we do that, I want the LCR won't be behind fabric, but everything else will.
Nice. And of course, Rockstars, we're recording this well in advance, so I mean that'd be some pretty fast building by the time.
Yeah, we're not that fast.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's see. A question for all of you to the Rockstars. Should those of us listening, should we start a group studio ourselves? Does it even have to be in person? Could it be like a virtual group studio?
Group studio.
Like, in other words, this is like a multi-room facility, multi-person facility.
Well, I can say, to riff off what we were talking about earlier, and I just definitely wanted to speak on it and just find the right time. But one of the greatest advantages I've had in my short career has been able to be surrounded by all of these people. So
it's now it's pronounced immersed. Now you're immersed.
Exactly. It's sped up my learning and my skill set exponentially.
Yeah.
Because going off what John said, being the smartest in the room, you're in the wrong room. And for a very long time when I was in this building, I felt very, very out of my league, out of water. And it's incredible how kind, but also how giving everyone is here. And it really does feel like a family. And I think if you have any opportunity to try to create something like that, you most certainly should.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's not easy. I mean,
like who broke the coffee machine today?
Yeah. I mean, it's not even, honestly, I've been doing this for quite some time, and Infrasonic has, grown from essentially me and my previous partner owning a recording studio and a small mastering room to this, and branching off into other aspects of audio. And I think the trick is working with like-minded people. I mean, my whole philosophy behind this company is, again, I'm an old punk rocker. Like, my whole thing is like, I want to work with people that I like and that are good at their job. I don't care how good you are at your job. If you're a shithead, no one wants to deal with you. You could be the best mastering engineer in the world, and I don't want you around. This really, truly kind of has to be like a family, and that's how this works. This is, for me, this isn't just a money-making thing. This is my life, and so I have the control to surround myself with people that I really like that also want to do the same. They want to surround themselves with like-minded people and create this collective, and that's an important aspect of what we're doing here. It wouldn't work if we didn't all really enjoy each other.
Yeah.
By the way, for a mastering engineer, you have excellent microphone technique, dude.
Thank you.
Do you guys feel like you've ever seen, on the total flip side of that, I'm not suggesting that people who don't like being around each other should be in a shared facility, but have you ever seen situations where people who just couldn't possibly get along but find a way to collaborate actually do great artwork?
I mean, I think musically, there's lots of great examples of that.
Oasis.
Hey, all you Oasis haters, hit the comments. I love Oasis. I don't care. I'll defend them to the death. But yeah, I mean, for art, it's a different story. But we also see how those things end. You can make some.
They end on VH1. I don't know. Is VH1 even a channel anymore? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Are we dating ourselves right now?
I mean, I'm always dating myself.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, but I think, I mean, there are moments in time where that sort of tension can create great art. We're doing something different. We're trying to facilitate art, Yeah. We're not the creators. And that's what we have to remind ourselves. And that's where, speaking probably, putting my mastering hat on, like, our job is to do no harm. That's the first part. But our job is to help, like, sort of, help direct the, what am I trying to say here? Like, basically, our job is to help guide the client and figure out exactly where they want to go and what their intention is. And, help them put their best foot forward and deliver the best art possible.
I am totally blown away with Isotope Ozone, rock stars. I've been mastering a lot of my records recently, and Ozone makes it so easy for me to get a fantastic sound. The Mastering Assistant will help you get started by measuring your track and suggesting all the settings you need to get a professionally targeted result based on the genre and EQ curve of your choice. You can even reference a specific song if you want, using simple yet sophisticated modules like Clarity, Impact, Low-End Focus, Stabilizer, Imager, Exciter, and Spectral Shaping, along with powerful dynamic EQ, compression, and limiting. You simply adjust the settings to your own taste, and it sounds incredible. And don't get me started on Master Rebalance, which literally lets you reach into the mix and manipulate the vocals, bass, and drums at the mastering stage. My bandmates are pretty demanding of my mixes, but now when I send off the masters for approval, I get comments back like, "Holy shit, pristine, damn good mastering, crystal clear, dude, you're a wizard. Finally, I love my singing, and the drums and bass sound huge." Check out the newest Ozone, RX, and all the other great plugins at iZotope.com and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off. OWC is your one-stop shop for flexible drive storage and connectivity solutions for your studio. The Mini Stack STX for your Mac Mini adds 2 additional drives over a universal SATA HDD SSD bay and an NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD, plus 3 additional Thunderbolt USB ports. The OWC Thunder Bay 4 chassis, built like a tank, gives you 4 hot-swappable 2.5-inch RAID configurable drive bays, plus an extra Thunderbolt 3 jack for daisy chaining up to 5 devices. Or check out the OWC Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock with 2 RAID configurable drives and 7 ports of connectivity, including a front-side SD card reader, 1 gig Ethernet, 2 USB 3.2 ports, a dedicated display port, and an additional backward-compatible Thunderbolt port. Get your studio connected with the Mini Stack STX, Thunder Bay 4, and Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock at macsales.com/rockstars. Use the custom link in our show notes because it's a great way for you to help support this podcast. So thanks, Rockstars. What are you excited about when it comes to Atmos? Maybe give you a chance to jump in. Now you're cutting a lot of vinyl too, right?
Yeah.
So should I even ask you about Atmos, or should we go the other end of the spectrum and ask you about vinyl?
Mono?
Compared to these fellas, I know very little about Atmos.
All right. But you're hearing it in here.
Yeah.
You know what it sounds like.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's like to be in a
I have PTSD from 5.1 DVD audio and SACD sessions, and my role was a lot different then. But yeah, that was not fun at all. So I'm excited to hear the finished product, but don't have a lot of experience personally working with Atmos.
But you are having the experience of hearing examples of it and thinking
it's totally amazing.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, take it. And then how about you? Do you feel like are you just like coming at this at your age, do you feel like, what are all these guys talking about? It's like,
I'm in a very interesting position because I walked right into the birth of Atmos and the birth of my mixing career. So I really have taken it upon myself to use it as an opportunity to get in on the ground level on something. And it's still somewhat the Wild West out there as far as what people are doing and how the mixes are coming out. But again, another great advantage of working with a collective like Infrasonic. Jay Clark is probably one of the best immersive mixers on the planet.
Yeah.
I just had a chance to interview him.
He's next level.
And Nick Townsend.
Yeah.
And I really got stuck on the, oh goodness, I'm just blanking on the title of it, but it was the horror.
Yeah, Lovecraft.
Lovecraft, yeah.
Yeah, it's probably the most immersive.
I was like, all right, Lidge, you need to move to another topic.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. So being able to pick his brain and steal as much as I can from him, to be honest with you, has been extremely helpful. So what I'm excited for the most about Atmos, though, is getting it to the consumer experience, because like John said, it's amazing in these rooms. We're not quite at the point where you can go out and you can listen to an Atmos mix in one of these rooms all the time. You know, we are very fortunate for that. So I'm excited to see the headphone technology advance and the finished product being closer to what the consumer is getting, because I think there's something to be excited for there. Yeah. And it'll happen.
Or the vice versa. The what the consumer hears being closer to what it was meant to sound like.
Right.
Yeah. So that's cool to hear you say that, because to me, it does seem like that headphone equation is an important part of that. And if you're sort of going there, that probably is a good indicator that.
Well, you know, like Apple is Apple doing Apple things. You know, they could change their software tomorrow and it could be 10,000 times better. You know, there are companies working on it.
Do you feel like growing up listening to music, for you, a lot of the music that you heard was in headphones, or do you feel like a lot of it was in speakers?
A lot of it.
You have a history as a gamer a little bit, right?
A little bit, yeah, back in the day. But I was a gamer when gaming was still, on a TV.
Right.
And you didn't need a special fancy monitor with over-ear headphones and a microphone to talk to your people on Call of Duty. Like, I was just playing on a TV, man. Yeah. Like, you know, just normal, winging it.
And in the car, right? Is the car sort of an important place for you too?
Yeah.
I'm not even asking Pete and John because I already know the answer. We all thought it. Yes.
I mean, I when I was young, you know, we still, not to date any of us, but you know, I was still had some CDs, you know, back in the day. CDs
I got some
still
more
around.
in my closet if you need it.
Yeah. But most of my life, I've had access to headphones and a MP3 player, not even an iPod, but you know, so I think I understand how important that experience is, and especially now with AirPods and, you know, cell phones, people are mobile, man. They're listening to music all the time on headphones. So
you feel like this move towards immersive sound is about enhancing that headphone experience on the one hand?
This is a personal opinion, but I feel like Atmos is a speaker format, and it needs to catch up in the headphone realm. If anybody's tried to listen to anything in binaural, it's not extremely immersive, right? But like I said, people are working on it.
And I'm curious what you guys think. I have heard like binaural that was recorded with binaural microphones sounding fantastic.
Yep, for sure.
There was I guess it was AES some years ago, and for the demo there, you know, we all put on headphones, and it was like, I had creepy moments.
Yeah,
from hearing
it's
the
uncanny.
sound around me, and I was like, wow, that's like tapping into a new emotion for making records.
Did you hear the Sony demo at Blackbird last week?
I did not. No, I couldn't go. I missed it. I was still resting.
I would go back and do it every single day. It was the most amazing thing I've ever heard in headphones.
Yeah. That's very cool, because Sony is known for having an underside to the sound too, right?
Yeah.
So in case you're being attacked by worms.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sub. So I put all the sub.
All right. So now I'm going to spin it back here, because the Lovecraft record got me very excited about Atmos, but
sure,
you know, I got to give credit where credit is due. And my copy of Spooky Scary Stories that was on vinyl is where, you know, cool spooky sounds originated. So I'm turning to you, John, to talk more about, like, what are you excited about in the world of vinyl? What do you want to say about any of that stuff? What do you do when you're like, I'm doing the cutting?
It's more, so I mean, frequently in mastering, we're thinking about a song, or maybe this is what the client thinks we're doing, is we're thinking about a song, we're working with a song. With vinyl, you're working with a side as, for the moment, the cohesive piece of music that we're working on. Right,
because when you're cutting the vinyl, you can't like do a song and then pause and then do another song necessarily.
Not at all. Yeah, it's a real-time continuous process.
Yeah, kind of like a gig.
Yeah. I mean, you can do things ahead of time. You can do test cuts. You can think of the songs individually. But yeah, at some point you have to get it to where you're going to press play and you're going to do the whole thing as one go. Man, yeah, I'm still learning. There's so much to do.
Yeah. And I mean, not to put you on the spot too much for the vinyl topic, because I mean, like, so Rockstars, I've got a playlist in the show notes where you can hear Pete's, Brandon's, and John's discographies. And they all sound great. One of the things that I noticed about listening to your stuff, which I think I instinctively knew because we had done that Twiggs record, was like, you just got a real wide variety of styles of music. Well, you know, like all this independent kind of music. That's the way I would think about it. Like,
Totally.
You know, cool college bands and, you know, which is also interesting because you talked about wanting to do records that people hear.
Yeah.
Yet you're also not afraid to work with artists that are like doing stuff that does not necessarily sound like, you know, the million selling
That's true.
song and stuff like that. But bottom line is I love it. I love what you're doing.
That's awesome.
Nice
Thanks.
work, man. And then I guess a question that I could ask regarding that also taps into the vinyl topic and the Atmos topic is just that the classical question of, you know, what do we do about low end and bass on records and stuff like that? I mean, you've got, when you're mastering and you guys are dealing with like a wide variety of styles of music, that's got to be like a moving goalpost a little bit. Is it? Or
I think the online discussion about it and in-person discussion about it is a little bit overblown. There's
a lot of bad there's a lot of bad information online about it.
Meaning like what to do about it, or just like people even describing it?
Yeah. And sorry, John, I don't mean to jump in.
No,
I'm sure we're going to say the same thing.
I mean,
There's a lot of like for instance, if you went on GearSpace and did a search for it, some people would say, oh, you're prepping audio for vinyl, mono everything under 150 or 300 and cut all the low end on the sides and do this and do that and use an elliptical filter. Don't do any of that. Make sure your mixes are solid. If there's any huge problems, like if you've got a mix with out of phase 808 kick drums on the side or something ridiculous, that's not going to cut. That's going to be a problem.
For vinyl.
But
It's not
for
gonna-
vinyl.
Will that cut on Atmos?
You do anything you want in Atmos. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yes
you
and-
know,
yes and no.
yes and no.
Yeah.
But but you can, you know, I mean, and what I mean by that is in a similar way that you can kind of do anything on digital. It might not sound good, but it will play back on vinyl.
Right.
You'll have an issue where not only will it not sound good, you won't even get to hear it. It won't play. It'll skip.
Yeah.
So the physics of cutting won't allow out of phase low frequency information to perform. It'll collapse the groove, and that's your biggest issue.
Do you feel like considerations about stuff like that is strictly at the time to cut vinyl stage, or is it rewind all the way to even the production stage and thinking about what you want to do in your mix with this music?
I think that in general, if you follow best mixing practices, most of the time you'll be fine, and leave that up to the cutting engineer. If you're doing something more experimental and you want to have like the bass guitar all the way over in the left and the drums all the way on the right side, which is kind of a rare exception, there might be problems.
Didn't they do that on those early stereo
Well, there's some
records?
Beatles records like that, of course, like Revolver.
Yeah.
But
Although I can't remember if they panned the bass to one side.
it was.
Of course they did, yeah.
The drums and bass were on one side and vocals and guitar were on the right, I believe. Now, that can work, but
It wasn't an 808.
yeah, exactly. And it wasn't low frequency information all the way to the left, and similar but different out of phase low frequency information also on the right. And that's the biggest problem. The cutting head doesn't understand how to cut that. It's trying to move in multiple directions at the same time, which just causes the cutter head to lift out of the lacquer and collapse the groove, which will cause a tracking issue.
So there's the technical aspect to low end and how it translates between something modern and digital like Atmos and something traditional like vinyl. What about you guys from a creative, just like Do you ever find that your instinctive appreciation of music and like where to go with something you're constantly having to shift it at all, or does it just feel natural to, make a huge bass decision one day and then another day, really control it and carve it back a little?
I mean, and we'll let John speak on this too, but in my opinion, I mean, it's rare that I ever have that big of an issue with low frequency. It's rare that I have major low frequency issues with mixes. When I do, then we have to address them. And if we know it's going to vinyl, every once in a while, maybe we have to speak to the engineer and make concessions. That's very rare. Mm-hmm. But we figure out how to make it work on vinyl. And that's why we do reference acetates and have the client listen to what it's going to sound like before we cut the masters. Because vinyl is a different thing. And I think expecting digital mixes and digital masters to sound the same when they're cut to lacquer, you want them to sound good. And I think oftentimes when we do it, it sounds better. But I don't think that should be the standard. I think you should accept the format for what it is.
Yeah.
And you have to make concessions.
When you say really have issues, does an issue usually imply that there might be too much of something going on in low end that needs to be?
Well, too much is easy for us to fix. Like we'd always, I think in general, as mastering engineers, we'd always rather have too much bass than not enough.
Yeah.
You can't add what's there. Yeah. It's really difficult to enhance. I mean, sometimes you can, but it's difficult to enhance that. But the wrong kind of bass.
So when you said you can't add what's there, you mean like can't add what's not there?
Yeah, if there's nothing below 100 cycles, then you're, unless you decide you want to overdub an instrument.
Harmonic plug-in.
Yeah,
right?
pull out a little fatty or something and play a subline. But it's honestly, I think for me, it's been a long time since I've had a track come through that we've had to that we've done for all formats, including vinyl, and we've had a real big problem with it.
Right.
Do
you find yourself wanting to enhance the shit out of some low end at times when you're working on records?
It's pretty rare. I mean, I like to, when things are going great, I like to say that I want the engineering to serve the music and not the other way around. So I would much prefer that the people making the music, the people engineering, the people making the mix, we're just focused on the music and not quite so much on the technicalities of it. The narrowing of the low end is something that will be handled by a trained professional. Hopefully it's not something you really need to put a lot of time into while you're mixing.
Or something we should automatically do.
Totally.
Right,
yeah.
Right. Narrowing meaning the old mono maker button.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is showing up on a lot of plugins now. So now when we're making records, we're like, should I be using more of that?
Yeah.
And I was messing with it recently, just doing a piano track, just trying to do like a Randy Newman style piano. And then I was like, should I do the mono thing? And I brought it to the middle. I was like, I don't know, that doesn't sound right to me anymore, so.
I think it's one of those things where like low end stuff comes out of a lot of fear on the sense of like, oh, am I not hearing this right? Or am I not in the right room? Which is fair, for a lot of people. But I think if you are in a treated room and you have been doing this for a little while, trust your ears, like you said, like you tried it, you didn't think it sounded right, then it doesn't sound right.
What do songwriters, music producers, DJs, EDM, TV, and film composers all have in common? They all need incredibly cool sounds that instantly transport the music to the style that they want. This is why Native Instruments is your ultimate toolkit with a massive library of sounds. Whether you want to create hip-hop, indie pop, classic rock, meditation music, pumping dance floor beats, or full orchestral arrangements, Native Instruments Complete Bundle offers you everything you need, from drums, loops, and beats to wild synths, ultra-realistic strings, and vintage electric bass, guitars, and keys. The list goes on and on. I personally love recording real bands in my studio and adding cool drum samples, synths, and futuristic keys from Battery, Contact, Massive X, Guitar Rig, and Hybrid keys, for example. Plus, it's super fun to create a string section for a rock rock band. Come on, go get Complete Start for free today with a bundle of 2,000 sounds and 6 gigs of samples over at nativeinstruments.com and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off. Some restrictions apply. Atom Audio introduces the all-new A-Series line of monitors, featuring the XART accelerated ribbon tweeter design, built-in DSP-based room correction, and speaker voicings to allow you to customize your Atom Audio monitors to your control room. The A-Series will rock in any studio. Small studio spaces or immersive multi-speaker configurations are perfect for the A4V or the new A7V, the next generation of the incredibly popular A7X. Mid-size rooms and narrow spaces will love the low profile of the A44H, expanding on the A7V sound, or the A77H, a true three-way midfield monitor delivering rich, spacious sound. And bigger studios will love the A8H, a three-way speaker and the pinnacle of the A-Series that delivers extremely accurate sound required for critical listening environments. Get the Atom Audio monitors and subwoofers that are right for your studio with an extended 5-year warranty at atomaudio.com. So, Brendan, how old are you?
I'm 30.
30, okay.
I know I don't
Do you
look
feel
it.
like, that's all right. Do you feel like you, quote, grew up with the era of bass music?
Absolutely.
I mean, do you guys feel like you grew up in an era of bass music?
Not really, because even as a young kid, when I got, being in the stuff I was into, kind of metal and punk rock, and then early hip hop, like even that early hip hop stuff, really, even when it hits, it doesn't have a ton of bass. Some of it does.
It's almost like early hip hop compared to now hip hop, everything dropped a whole octave.
It totally, yeah. I mean, Wu-Tang is a great example since we've got, we're representing there.
Yeah.
And like, even the early Public Enemy stuff, it's not like modern hip hop.
There was some of that older.
It is fun as shit, though.
There was some of that
That's
older
my
stuff
shit.
that hit pretty hard, man.
Sir Mix-a-Lot Seminar, I'm telling you, underrated hip hop record. That shit slams.
Yeah.
Well, I think about dub music as being like big bass back in the day. I mean, even like
I love dub.
Even Bob Marley, like mentally, I think about the bass, but then when I play it, I'm like, it's very, pleasantly all balanced and everything. But like, going to listen to like Mad Scientist and stuff like that. But then even then I hear that against a modern thing that's like, well, that's not a lot, it's a totally different, like upper kind of bass.
It's different, but if you put on a Bob Power Tribe Called Quest mix and you don't miss the bass, you know what I mean? Like you put on some Dr. Dre stuff, like that stuff was dialed, man.
Do you grow up listening to any like trap kind of low end?
Yeah, I don't know if trap technically was around yet when I was growing up, but I love pop, hip hop, rock music, which has now got a lot of low end in it as well at times. New metal, haters and lovers out there.
How did you guys all feel about like Along Comes Billie Eilish's record and it wins the Grammy? How did you feel about what was going on with the bass and records?
Well,
that did that feel like? Do you often feel like a new sound comes out or anything, and then it changes you're like, I gotta push hard in this direction or anything like that?
I mean, I wouldn't say I was inspired by that stuff, but like I think the Billie Eilish stuff is cool, and shout out to our fellow mastering engineer John Greenham for doing a killer job.
Yeah.
He's fantastic, and he's kind of a bass junkie. But it didn't really make me think any different about anything I was doing, But I think I really appreciate for how unique those records are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I thought,
really
cool. I was
struck
by it too, but I think I like bass a lot, which is probably why I'm asking the question.
I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you guys have another comment on bass, jump in. But if not, then I'll spin that question on same concept as like, along comes a new record. It inspires you to try something or push for something musically. Does anything come to mind for all of you?
I'm obsessed with a few bands right now, but these guys can go first.
All right. We'll come back with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm now obsessed with your discography. So
There you go.
I was just trying to make it all
We
sound
all
like
are.
It's funny. John and Pete, I don't know if they know this, but both mastered two of my favorite records.
that. Go. Tell us, do tell.
Yeah. So Pete's is the easy one. I love that first Halsey record. And I walked into the side room over here with just, about 50 Grammy plaques and records all over the wall of just different things that Pete has worked on. And I saw a little CD sitting there with the cover on it. And I was like, wait a second. Like, I didn't know you mastered that.
Yep.
And that just goes into like, people crediting things very poorly.
Yeah.
Shout out labels.
I have credit on that.
You probably are.
Yeah.
You probably are. I think it just depends on the.
It could
The
be worse.
source.
You could be like me and change your name 3 times during your career.
Yeah.
They know what to call you.
Yeah. Or Dan Bacigalupi having the name Bacigalupi, shout out Dan, has I think 5 different all music credit entries.
And one
Just
of them,
for the
I
spelling.
believe, is Danny Bag of Donuts. I think he's officially credited as that on a few things.
That's great. And then John, you mastered a record a while back, a Kentucky band
Yeah.
named Sunday Best.
Yeah, that was a cool record.
And I remember I got that on a burnt CD from a friend from Slade, Kentucky, around where they were from.
Yeah.
And it was really cool seeing where they came from and where they got to. And I was like, I had no idea you worked on it at the time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I was moving too fast to write down all the different names of the artists, but there was a real, because of the kind of bold indie rock stuff going on, one band comes at it and it's like all about like kind of sounds, and then another band comes and it's all like dark and it's muted tones, and another artist might come along and it's electronic and it's ambient stuff like that. And it's just struck me about how you must all have to keep aware of like, where's the emotion in this? So like this band, like there's the emotions in this high end that would never work for this other artist, but without it, this isn't doing the right thing or something.
I mean, I think for guys like us, I would say that's our superpower. I mean, I came from the indie rock world. That's my entire world. And I cut my teeth doing a lot of records that most people wouldn't even understand how they're supposed to sound. So, I've done records for noise pop bands like No Age, and I did a lot of work with Best Coast. And then from doing those Best Coast records, I did 40 million records for bands that wanted to sound exactly like Best Coast, which was a pretty unusual sound, And frankly, I really love working on stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's I love everything I work on. I feel really fortunate to get to work on the stuff that I do, but that's the challenging stuff because you have to know what to touch and what not to touch.
Yeah.
And it might sound crazy and muddy, but that might be how it's supposed to sound. And you have to understand where those artists are coming from.
Yeah.
And
guitars are so fascinating because one band, it's like the guitars are supposed to be dark. Another band, it's supposed to be bright and, cut through.
But I find myself I'm trying to listen to a lot of music that I'm not working on right now. And I think that's inspiring. And I'd get stuck in these ruts where I'm only listening to the music I work on. And then I leave here and I'm like, I just want to listen to NPR or whatever on the drive home, or a podcast or whatever. Now I'm actively listening and listening and listening again. And I'm kind of having this weird musical renaissance, and especially discovering all these great punk rock bands that are coming out when I didn't know there was any good punk rock coming out,
Yeah,
but I mean, there's this amazing band from Sweden. These guys are tired of me talking about them. This band called Viagra Boys. It's a ridiculous name, but they released I had nothing to do with this record, and I wish I did. They released a record last year called Cave World, and I think it's my favorite record of 2022.
Right.
They're an amazing band that somehow encapsulates, like they take references from krautrock, like bands like Noi and Can, and then mix that with like electronic dance music and punk rock and jazz, like free jazz, with the most charismatic maniac singer ever.
I'm loose.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I love it.
Great.
And there's another band from Australia called Emmylou and the Sniffers with pretty much the greatest front woman of all time. They're like, the name's ridiculous, but laugh about it now because she's gonna be the next Gwen Stefani. She's gonna be huge.
That's great.
And they are an unbelievable band.
Is she in her ska phase right now, or is she?
No ska. But
Sorry.
like they're I have yet to see them live, but I've watched lots of live performances and I can't wait to see them. And it's exciting to see these bands doing different stuff and seeing people react really positively to that as well. You know?
Yeah. Well, what's fun for me too is meeting younger generations, you know, like yourself, Brandon, and interns that have come through my studio, and watching people, you know, start a band, make some music. It reminds me of something. And then it turns out they'd never heard of that band.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
You know?
Maybe they heard it in the womb or something.
Well,
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I will say there's a small group of us that I would like to think of as some sort of musical historian, in the sense of I always loved going back to bands that inspired the bands that I was listening to, and going back, and then eventually getting to Led Zeppelin or the Beatles or whoever the hell started, you know, rock and roll for most of these bands. But I always liked being the guy that was like, oh yeah. Do you like this band? Like, have you listened to this band or this band, or, you know? And I think that just comes back to having a passion for music.
Do you ever say that to Reed and he's like, dude, I mixed that record.
Yeah.
Many times Reed will be like, oh yeah, I worked with them. And I'll be like, I had no idea. Again, credits, not the greatest part of the industry. But yeah, it's just, I don't listen, or I don't do much else other than listening to music. You know, podcasts from time to time, but it's almost always headphones in still.
Right. Yeah. All right. So let's see. What do you guys want to talk about? What are you excited about right now, John?
Well, something that I'm kind of been more aware of in my own life, but also in the industry, and it's coming to light as we're speaking here. When I was younger, my relationship with music was about curating my own collection of music. So I thought that was like a inward journey. So I'm going to buy every single David Bowie record, and I'm going to listen to each one of them 10 billion million times until I've unearthed all the secrets. You know, the Beatles, the Smiths, the Clash, the Who. And as I got older, I realized that's not really how everybody else, some people did, but not everybody else listened to music that way. And the technology is a little bit guiding that, because in the past, the music was something you bought and you took home.
Right.
And you owned yourself. Another way to listen to music is just to listen to it. And maybe you can seek out things that you're not already familiar with, or that other people have already experienced. And so I think streaming really does support that in a new way that was not possible before. You know, when I was younger, I would hear, well, you wouldn't hear it before you bought it. You'd have to drive to the city and go get it. Sometimes you had to drive, you know, you didn't have a record player in your car. You didn't have a CD player in your car. You come home and you have this CD you just spent $18 on. I mean, you're making $5 an hour. So it's a major expense. And yet we did it multiple times a week. So you get the CD and you're like, terrific. I only almost like one song on this thing.
Yeah.
And so you had to listen to it a billion times until you grew to love it. And that experience does, like, if I hear a song, if I try to listen to an album on streaming and I don't like it, I'm probably not going to keep listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I am going to move on to something else and discover some new thing.
Do you ever feel like the time that you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for a simple, straightforward, step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take you years to learn? What if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover the proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of our students, David. Quote, "Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information and mentoring on the mix process that I've ever been a part of. That was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, but condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session." Close quote. Look, I'm so confident that this will take your mixes to the next level that if you can't get a killer mix within 30 days, I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. So if you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and start now by checking out the free preview of the Ultimate Snare Mixing Trick. And I'll see you at the front row table of the Grammys. Cheers. There's also that experience of like just listening to a full album, you know, the way we did off the CD and the vinyl. I remember listening to Bringing Home Nirvana Nevermind, and I actually fell asleep during the record.
Wow.
And then it was, I think after the last song, and then something woke me up. I was like, what the hell was that? It was the hidden track. It just like blasted back out of the speakers.
Awesome.
And that, you know, little bit of a side note, but I wanted to elaborate on what John said too. I think for me, that's the amazing thing about vinyl. It's, and I've said this a million times, it's not the analog versus digital bullshit that everyone likes to get in the muck about. And side note, one of the most hilarious things about a lot of those arguments is that a lot of records that people think are truly analog records are not, and were cut through low res digital delay lines. That's a topic for another podcast. But the best thing about records is that it forces you to pay attention.
Yeah.
And you sit down and you listen to it, and it's like the artist intended. But, you know, in my 20s, I spent every dime I had on records. And then in my mid-20s, when I moved to the Bay Area, for a while, I lived in Berkeley right off Telegraph. I would go to work, and every day I would walk to Amoeba and Rasputin, and I would spend all my money on records. And back then, I was buying at least 20 records a week. It was crazy. And I literally couldn't get enough.
Were they cheaper?
All I wanted to do. I spent all my money. Yeah, they're way cheaper.
They're so expensive.
Yeah, they weren't $30 a record. But I would spend all my money on records, and I shared, I shared an apartment in Berkeley and I lived in a room that didn't even have a door. And I had no TV, because who the fuck cares about TV when you're surrounded by records?
Right.
You know? And then, you know, throughout my life, even a little younger than that, when I was touring in my early years, and, you know, growing up in the punk scene in Colorado, like a lot of times you would find out about bands because they would come to your town, and you would buy their LP or their 7-inch, and there's some weird band from Winnipeg or whatever. And then you would find out about them. And then through them, you would find out about other bands that were similar, and you would just seek these things out, and you would trade records with friends. And I miss that. And it makes me sad that's not a thing that people will get to experience anymore, because we all have access to every bit of music that's released on our phones. That's great as well. That's turned me on to a lot of new music, but I really love the discovery that John was talking about, where sometimes I remember a good example of this is I think I was 16, and I went to the mall, whatever, Sam Goody or whatever it was, and I saw a Subhumans record, and I loved the UK punk band, the Subhumans, and I bought it, and I listened to it. I'm like, this fucking sucks. I'm like, oh, it's the Canadian Subhumans. That's why this sucks. I love Canada, by the way, but I'm saying I would like, but it was kind of a funny thing, and I ended up selling the record. It wasn't what I was into, but that was an interesting experience.
I've totally bought the wrong album. I think I misremembered the name of the band, and I bought some other. I was like, what?
Yep, totally.
I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle ground here because, I collect records still. I have a pretty good record collection. But when I'm doing the discovery now, it's the bargain bins, or like the 70s records that have been sitting in somebody's attic for 50 years. And I'll just pull it because it looks interesting or sounds like a cool name or, whatever. And that's my discovery now. Yeah. But
you guys got any totally wacky memories of like picking up like a totally wild record in a thrift store or like in the bargain bin or anything?
I have hundreds.
Yeah, like weird religious records, weird compilations.
I have for years too. I collected weird, bizarre Christian culty records. I have at least 20 Jim Neighbors religious records. Nice. I have probably over 20 Jimmy Swaggart records. If you might know who Jimmy Swaggart is, maybe not. A strange televangelist. I got really into weird oddball records like that. I just like to collect them.
Wait, did you say Jim Neighbors too?
Jim Neighbors.
You got the Jim Neighbors ones.
Yeah. So I have a collection of bizarre records like that, and I have lots of crazy, rare finds in thrift stores back in the day, and those are a lot harder to find now because people are so aware and crate diggers, and people go out every day, scour the thrift stores for all the crazy. Yeah.
Every once in a while, I still find some cool stuff. Like I found something that was like a crazy funky horn band and brought it back for my daughter, who's got the turntable in the house. The like classic Amazon, looks like it's made out of wood, and it's got a cassette on the side, a CD player, and you can Bluetooth with your phone if you want. But she loves it. She's spinning records every morning and stuff, and it's cool to see that.
Yeah.
But so one of the challenges I find with the streaming, though, I agree, it's great to be able to find this stuff, but it's very hard to re-find it again after you found it the first time.
Agreed.
Have you guys found good tips for that or anything? Or do you
the past is gone. Move on to the new moment. That moment is dead and it will never return.
I like to download whole albums, because it's in your cloud. Like there's no reason not to. I know lots of people are big on the playlists, but I'll take a whole album still, and then I'll play all of my music on shuffle, and I will keep something on there on my shuffle until I get to it and I decide that its time is over, or it's like 3 albums ago and the artist has new stuff out,
Yeah.
And then I'll go in and I'll take it out. But you get some of these days when you're shuffling through your thing and you land on something that you completely forgot about, and it really brings you back.
Yeah. I've been trying. I'm in the album phase now. I really want to enjoy an entire album by an artist.
Do you do that through the streaming stuff too?
Yes, because I'm in my car a lot, and I'm also a weirdo, and I travel back and forth to LA and all over the place. And if I have the time, I would rather drive. So I do a lot of long drives, and I want to listen to an entire album without skipping around. That's just the phase I'm in. I've definitely done the playlist thing. And in fact, it was funny this morning, I threw up Spotify in my truck on my way to work, and this like option came up, your AI DJ. I'm like, shit. I gotta see what's gonna happen.
Too many damn acronyms.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden this like robot starts talking to me, and he's telling me about how he's gonna pull from my catalog, and it was hilarious, and played a bunch of songs I'd played before, and then would kind of announce other songs like a DJ and would mispronounce the name. It's AI, so mispronounce things, and but then try to tell these weird little funny stories. It was really creepy. I was like, yep, that's not the experience for me at all. Yeah. It really, really actually kind of bummed me out. I just had to see what it was about.
Just play the next song.
Yeah.
Why would you?
Yeah, exactly. And get off my lawn.
There you go. So if you're going to do the album listen, is it just like you just click on the title of the album, press go on the first song, or do we need to?
I'm going to
take an extra moment.
I'm going to put the stylus down on the record. I'm going to take the record out of the sleeve. If I'm at home, I have a better than average setup at my house. And a pretty nice listening space that's all my own. And I'm lucky enough to have a space segregated from my family for music and for listening. And I would rather listen to records if I can. Now, I still listen to a ton of digital music, obviously, because it's way more convenient. I'm not listening to vinyl in my car. But the experience...
You could. I mean, they made cars with
they
record
did.
players.
7-inch players. But the experience, my preferred experience would be sitting down and listening to a record. Maybe, and oftentimes I might be reading while that's happening, or playing online poker.
So I have a question for you.
That's the thing.
Do you consider your record collection similar to what John was saying, which is like an internal thing? Your records kind of show a little bit of yourself in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say I've been a record collector since I was like 13 or 14. And music has been a very large part of my identity my whole life. I became obsessed with music probably when I was 11 or 12, and then
stopped.
through skateboarding I got into punk rock, and that's when I started playing music. And from there, my whole identity was being a musician and listening to music. And yeah, my record collection became part of that.
Yeah.
And I've definitely gone through phases in my life where I've had years where I'm like, fuck all these records, I'm selling them. And I've gone through some crazy phases where I've sold hundreds of records at a time, and I've sold a lot of records that I deeply regret selling. But they're still really real important part of my life,
True.
What's deeper, the groove on the album or your regret for selling? Right, here we go.
Yeah.
Pete, what do you want to ask John?
What do I want to ask John? I feel like I get to ask John all sorts of great questions all the time. But
where'd you put the coffee?
And we talk about this a lot, I love all of the mastering engineers here, and I have a lot of friends that are great mastering engineers, but
and how many are there here? I don't think we gave everybody a shout out, did we?
In Infrasonic?
Yeah.
All right, I lose track.
Put you right on the spot.
Me, John, Dan Bocciagalupi, Ray Janicki, Nick Townsend, Piper Payne, and Jay Clark does a fair bit of mastering. Phil Feynman.
Is Catherine?
Catherine is strictly restoration. Restoration. She's our restoration expert. She's amazing.
That sounds like, is that like Restoration Hardware? That
exactly.
Like expensive store, Catherine.
Yeah.
Well done.
But and maybe this is more of a statement, but one of the things I think John does a great job of. Listen, mastering is subjective, right? Like what sounds great to someone might not sound good to someone else. As in like
whatever I think is the best idea. That kind of subjective.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
But John seems to be able to sculpt records and create a tone that is just extra pleasing to my ear. And
that's so nice. I don't know what to say.
But it's true. I mean, and it's funny because we've been working together on a lot of vinyl stuff for the last couple of years, and that's one of the things that really appealed to John coming to work here. And I love cutting records with him because the crazy thing is even though, he didn't necessarily know it, he knew more. I mean, he'd been through a lot of the vinyl process before, obviously, because most of his artists are cutting vinyl. But when he would bring stuff in and, I would help him prep it for vinyl, he'd be like, okay, so what do we need to do? I'm like, actually, we don't need to do anything. This is fantastic. So part of the reason I think I like and appreciate John's mastering style is that maybe he doesn't, but I'm assuming he's thinking a couple steps ahead, I assume. Partially because I am too, but he understands the vinyl process. And so I think about that. I think about that regardless of whether I'm cutting vinyl or not. I think a good master is a good master for all formats. So I'm always sort of tailoring stuff in such a way that it's going to be pleasing if we do have to cut it to vinyl, even if we don't. And so, we've talked about this before,
Totally.
but you know, sorry, it seems awkward me saying this to John with him sitting 4 feet away from me, but it's true.
He's blushing.
I really I really appreciate and I love the, you know, his sort of take on the records he does. And, you know, I'm a fan of a lot of the bands that he's mastered. So
do you guys, does this happen a lot in this facility where like somebody just opens their mastering door like, I love you guys, and then they just close it?
Pretty much.
It echoes down the hallway.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, again, like work with the people you love and work with the people you respect and that you can learn from.
Yeah.
I feel like we're all always learning from each other.
Mhm.
It's awesome. And like, I mean, one of my favorite things about John, we had an awesome time at NAMM. We all went out to NAMM this year. We rented a house a mile from the convention center and it was just fucking great. And like, we're all riding around in whatever car we're in and like having these little micro discussions / arguments about audio.
Yeah.
And my favorite thing about John Baldwin is he won't let any bullshit slip by. He will call you out regardless of who you are. If you're wrong, he will, and if he has a different opinion, he will state his opinion.
And make sure you're aware of it.
I fucking love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Even if I disagree with it, I love it. I like, it's great. It's challenging. And sometimes you need someone to challenge your paradigm to make you think differently and to get out of the box that you might be kind of trapped in, you know? And so it's interesting to me because sometimes like, you know, we'll bullshit about some topic and maybe I don't agree with it, but then like later I'll think like, oh, wait a minute, I understand why he believes that and why it works for him. And it'll make me think differently about something that I've done. And it's, we're always learning, right? Like I learn something new every single day. I'm grateful for that. And like having this wealth of knowledge here, we all just get to continue to get better and better at our craft.
Yeah.
You know?
This podcast is proud to present Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you're ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I master my own records using nothing but plugins. Plus, I take you into a world-class mastering studio, Sterling Sound, to meet with Ryan Smith and hear how he professionally mastered my record, Skadoosh, for release to streaming platforms. That's the music you hear on this podcast, Rockstars. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free mixing course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins and Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads for you to practice mixing and even upload to your website if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy to get started now. Speaking of getting better and better at your craft, Brandon, what's the next thing you're excited to try in the studio? What's something that you're like, oh, I can't wait to do that? You know, mess with this. Are you guys like, are you constantly seeing some new piece of gear or some new method from these guys where you're like, oh, I want to try that out? Or
Yeah.
like musical, stylistic stuff you want to
The
do?
goalpost is always moving, you know, faster when you start, but still moving no matter what level you're at. For me, I'm still excited every day to come in here and just get to work on music. Like, and I feel you may not look back on yesterday and feel like you've gotten better, but being able to look back a month, 3 months, a year and realize how much I've grown and how much I've progressed, like that still fucking pumps me up, man. Like I just, anytime I sit back and have gratitude on that, like it's a good day. But going forward, you know, like we were talking about Atmos a little bit. I'm interested to see how far I can push it. You know, how much, once you get to a point of like, okay, I think I understand translation and things that may work or may not work. And you know, what the overall goal is of the Atmos mix. We're still in the field where a lot of people want to hear something similar to the stereo mix.
Yeah.
So,
Are you in the position of setting up a mix and a mix template for Reed before he mixes it? Does that come to you first and you get it all assembled or something?
Yeah. So on the immersive stuff, Reed and I are pretty much co-mixing everything at this point. And it'll come to me first and I'll get it set up. We don't necessarily have a standard template. It's kind of like Reed's stereo template in the sense that it's quite dynamic. You know, we may try a new plugin and like it and it stays, or you know, we'll keep reverbs and things like that, but nothing on the actual tracks unless it's something that has been working recently.
Right. So does that look like if you're about to mix the next song, do you open up a blank template session and then start pulling tracks into that, or do you open up the song where it's at and then you import like the last mix you just did?
The best way,
you don't have to get too geeky on
yeah,
that.
yeah. The best way that we've found, we're typically always working on stems, right? Whether it's our stems from the stereo mix or somebody else's. So you're trying not to do Atmos from 192 tracks at a time. Right. We're not usually doing it from the session. We have tried and succeeded. But at this point, with the goals for Atmos versus stereo and how much time is invested and how much time we can invest in it budget wise, you know, stems are pretty much always what we're getting. So we'll import those and then I'll build a template around those files.
Okay. And then I don't think I really asked you this yet, but when it comes from the mix to a mastering stage, you're mastering the Atmos stuff. And what
Correct.
does that mean?
So it's funny. We just spent all weekend discussing this.
Because we don't see each other enough during the week.
Exactly. I mean, especially in this town and in the kind of early explosion of Atmos for music, I think the labels got really excited. Someone started the narrative like, oh, Atmos doesn't need to be mastered. So I feel like labels were like, oh, awesome. Well, we don't need to spend money on mastering. So everyone has heard the horror stories of immersive mixes.
Was that said by the same person that said we don't need labels?
Yeah, probably. But, you know, immersive mixes getting out there and having to be pulled right away because they just sounded like garbage or they're technical issues. Now, at its core, mastering is quality control. That's the most important part of our job. Don't fuck up the part. Quadruple check it, preferably with multiple ears. Make sure everything is right before it gets sent out. At the core, that's the most important part. And sometimes for Atmos, that might be all we do. But frankly, when we're mastering Atmos tracks from an ADM, we actually have more control over that. We almost have mix control over that. So it's really easy to handle any technical issues at that level. You know, and some of the things we might do is obviously make sure that we're not exceeding loudness specs for Dolby music, making sure it translates to every single fold down format. So there's a lot of listening, seeing how it's translating to Apple Spatial, seeing how it's sounding in binaural, listening to every, you know, we're 914 set up in here. We're listening to 714, you know, we're folding it down all the way to make sure that it sounds good. And then when we're doing albums, we're making sure that those tracks sound good together.
So part of that would be folding it down to headphones and hoping that it does the best you could hope for.
Yeah, there's a lot of time spent on headphones and a lot of time spent on different Apple devices, AirPod Maxes, AirPod Pros. Yeah. So there is a tremendous amount of quality control going on. And from there, you know, depending on how it's translating, it might sound amazing in a room, but maybe something strange is going on in Apple Spatial. So we'll go back and make some adjustments, or maybe something is really whacked out in binaural mix. We'll have to go through and change some of the binaural settings to make sure it's working.
Okay. In the interest of time here, let me jump to you again, Brandon, and say, what would you like to ask either of these two guys? What have you been curious about?
Well, I get to see. I ask Pete a shit ton of questions all the time. Probably too many questions.
What have you needed to ask John? And his face is not red from embarrassment. I put cayenne pepper in his coffee before the interview.
I guess I'll ask him a softball because I don't know if the listeners know much about it, but how do you like working in RCA? And do you?
I think we got a bad connection here. This connection's dropping. Next question. No.
Man, I love it. It's an amazing building. I've been obsessed with it ever since I moved here.
What is it for the rock stars who might maybe?
I work in RCA Studio A, which is this 3-story building that was built in the mid '60s. Was built by the Bradley family, Owen Bradley and Howard Bradley, that were producers and musicians from the '60s through the '80s and '90s.
Bradley's Barn or something was an early one too.
Bradley's Barn there were several Bradley's Barns, some of which still exist.
Who needs more than one barn?
These
Bradley.
folks, apparently. Yeah. So this building was the headquarters of RCA Records Nashville. For decades, I've heard so many legends and stories that, this was Chet's office. This was Chet's office. But Chet Atkins is a huge, huge hero of mine, artistically and technically and business and all the above.
He's pretty good at guitar.
Yeah. He's a big hero of mine.
Apparently.
So it was just magic for me to be able to get into the building. It's been renovated and rebuilt and rejuvenated. The room I'm in has been a mastering room since 1968. A bunch of Elvis and Guess Who records were mastered there, plus a billion country records and things you might not have heard. So when I first visited in the early 2000s, there was a lathe. It was the first time I got to see a lathe up close. The room I'm in had this bizarre digital mastering console.
And is it an old lathe? Is there a lot of like OG equipment in there?
No, that exists. There was a fire, unfortunately. This is also like 20 years ago, but yeah, it was upsetting.
That is upsetting.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that. And then I think is it Studio A or B that's open for tours as well, and where people actually come through and get to see that?
It's fine.
That's B.
B is open for tours. I have the fortune to encounter all kinds of weirdos in the parking lot all the time, and but it's I don't know why it's annoying because it should be kind of funny, but I guess it just happens so much. But yeah, I'm profoundly annoyed by the tourists who are coming to do exactly what I'm doing, which is to pay homage to the places where these things were done. And
yeah.
Do you ever sign any autographs, taking pictures?
Why not you come see a legend while it's still being made? And it's happening today.
Well, I can understand. It would be a little bit distracting. It's hard to even have sit there and mix in the studio when the band's sitting in the back of the room.
But there's so many things happening on planet Earth right now. Like, just these folks are interested in the history of music. That's totally awesome. Great. Come on by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just don't stay out of my parking spot.
There you go. Well, we went down to Muscle Shoals not long ago for a weekend, and man, did I really enjoy that experience. I've only been down twice, but
I need to get down.
That's cool.
I still haven't.
I definitely encourage all of you listening to just, consider it a weekend adventure to go to any,
Man, I thought Sun Studios was pretty cool.
The history of
in
music.
Memphis.
And it's fun.
Yeah. Reed and I kept talking about doing a motorcycle ride down there. We still haven't done it and need to make it happen.
Right on. Well, so we are getting to the end here, and I appreciate you guys putting in all this time and hanging out with us. Let me ask you this question that is hypothetical, but I like to ask all our guests. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine now and go back in time, and you go get to find the younger version of yourself, and you say, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day, which might be don't park in my damn parking spot. But if you could go back and give yourself a bit of advice, what would you like to say? We can start with you if you want.
I think, so I see this a lot. We've, obviously throughout the years, we've had a lot of studio spaces and a lot of help and a lot of interns and a lot of people coming up. And I've been in that position too, is you have to be a good hang in this business. In fact, that's kind of one of the most important things. You can be really good at your job, but if you can't fit in and you can't hang out and you can't, you got to know when to be present and when not to be present. And don't say something just because you feel like you have to say some shit. Oftentimes the best thing you can do is learn and absorb and take every opportunity you have to be in a studio. If you have an opportunity to be in a studio, yeah, sometimes it's either, and around here, it's either super boring or just crazy and everyone's running around with their hair on fire. But like, take advantage of that. It's a unique experience to be in a studio most people don't get to. And like, we take it for granted because we spend our entire lives in studios. But take advantage of it.
I agree with you that once you start making records and then you go hang out in a studio, you can really be struck by how it's really fun to be in the studio when you're making a record, but it can be incredibly boring to hang out in a studio also at times.
Yeah.
So it is a challenge. I mean, I remember even as an intern assistant, it's like I had to teach myself, like, dude, you got to hang in there. This is like, most of this is boring today, but you can't be falling asleep in the back of the room.
Yeah.
Which has happened. We've had them happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had an instance a couple years ago where we had a big party here, and I think it was that party we were talking about. We did a big direct session here for Summer NAMM, and there were a couple hundred people here. It was crazy. Produced Like a Pro was doing, Warren was doing his thing, and we had 2 interns, and both those interns got drunk and made asses of themselves. And
during the party.
I'm pretty sure those interns aren't working in the industry anymore.
Oh,
it's like, hey, like, yeah, there's a lot of people partying and having fun, but you have to understand, like, you're not there yet. When you've been doing that for 30 years, then maybe you can cut loose, but right now is your time to shine and work. And a good example is we had another intern that crushed it that day and was super on top of it. And that person is working in the industry now.
And he's drunk off his ass right now. Having a great time.
Yeah.
All right, Brandon, what advice do you want to give yourself?
Man.
I mean, you can give me advice too.
I would say for me, it's you can hear something 1,000 times and it won't sink in. And maybe that 1,001st time it will. So I'll just say it again, but the gear doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It don't worry about getting all of the cracked plugins and feeling like you're going to become a great mixing engineer. Focus on your ears, focus on understanding what you're hearing, and trust yourself and trust your environment, and you will be so much better, so much faster.
Yeah.
And then, on that, like if you really want to do it, if you really want something, then commit to it. I got a piece of advice a long time ago. I don't even know who said it to me, but it was like, the difference between people that make it and don't make it are the people that stay in the game long enough, So if you may be scraping by, you may be doing whatever you can to do it. And some people, like, it's just, it's enough and you're out. And some people, there is no out, So if you want it, just know that you deep down, like you can do it.
Yeah. Good tip. The thing about gear is, like, if you get all the gear, then you walk into your studio and you look at it and you're like, oh shit, it's going to take like 20 lifetimes for me to learn all this stuff.
Oh man. I was like, oh man, I get to intern with Reed Shipman. That's cool. Has a ton of outboard gear, and like that was definitely a big hole for me, being self-taught and working on a laptop and stuff. And then I come in here and he looks me in the face and he's like, I was like, man, this stuff's so cool. And he's like, none of this matters.
Yeah.
None of it matters. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, there you go.
John.
I would say be patient, be gentle. Never compromise. Learn how to compromise.
You should also go back and tell yourself, and don't worry, man, your hair will always be awesome.
Best,
A little
best
bit less than
hair
it
in
was.
the industry.
Seriously.
Hands down.
Yeah.
If I could only.
Yeah.
Well, Pete, Brandon, John,
Yeah.
and Max, who's standing patiently in the back of the room
Thanks,
during
Max.
this entire interview taking photos. Thank you, Max. Thanks for being here with us. Rockstars, thanks for listening. Make sure to stick around because I've got some special stuff for you coming up in just a moment here at the end of the show. And let the Rockstars know, where should they go find out more about you? I mean, if they're going to go check out Infrasonic.
Infrasonic.com.
InfrasonicsSound.com.
InfrasonicsSound.com.
Well done. Awesome. Thanks for being here, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible: Lewitt, Atom Audio, Native Instruments, Isotope, Spectra 1964, and OWC. And remember, at isotope.com and nativeinstruments.com, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in our show notes, because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars: Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, Liz Hulitskaya, and Roberto Oxman de Aragao for additional podcasts and video help. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.